I'm Erin, and I write fantasy fiction and poetry.
And I'm Kaylee, and I write fantasy and science fiction.
And today we're going to be talking about how we start our stories. So, where do you typically start when you get like an idea for a story? What does that kind of look like for you?
I think my stories often start with I was about to say an idea, and that is the least helpful thing anyone's ever said. I think I'll start with just a concept of a world, or of a vibe or a feeling. I've heard people say they'll imagine a scene. Supposedly, I don't know if this is true at all. This caveat, but my mom told me that she read somewhere that the woman who wrote Twilight had a dream about a sparkly vampire and was like, I'm gonna turn this into a book. That is a really old memory of something my mom told me that she read. So that might not be true, but I'm sure people, you have this vision. And I think mine tends to not be so much as a vision of a moment, but an interesting blend of things. Like a lot of my ideas that I have that I haven't written yet are things like, okay, what if it was this type of situation or character, but in this setting? Or what if it was I'll see something in a TV show, like I saw in, I think it was in Naruto, which I haven't finished. But anyway, there's one episode in Naruto, I think, where they have these, I don't know. Anyway, I think it's these two twins who want to both be it's like in a flashback. They're very minor characters, and they both want to be the head of their family or whatever. And so there's I don't fully remember. It's the younger one and the older one. There's all this conflict or whatever. And I was just oh, that's an interesting thing. You could have a story just about that. And so I think I'll have I have an idea for a story that's based off of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, because when I read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as a kid, I was there could be way more sea monsters in this. So I'm okay, what if it's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but almost more like an alien exploration horror thing, but underwater. So I think that's how a lot of my stories start. And my current project is a little bit different, because I kind of started it saying I'm going to make up an idea that I don't care about to get over my writer's block. And so that one kind of didn't start from this this little concept that a lot of my other ones are, and it sort of evolved a little bit differently, if that makes sense. This is it's very esoteric or abstract, I feel like, talking about how you start a story.
That's okay. I mean, they typically start a little bit where you're how did we get there?
That's true. That's true. Yeah. What do you start with?
I definitely am in the category of kind of seeing this moment happening.
Oh, okay,
or seeing a scene. It's usually not a full scene. So the one I'm working on now, well, let me back up a little bit. So usually something inspires that, something kind of sparks that notion. It's not I'm just walking around and then suddenly I'm oh, what if there's a story about this? So for the one I'm working on now, it was I was listening to a podcast about writing, and they had mentioned some scenario or whatever, and then that just kind of was I don't know, it just kind of brought this image to my mind of a character in a scenario, in a different situation. It wasn't exactly what they were describing or whatever, but that's usually how it happens, is something will spark the scene, and then I'm just kind of oh, who is that and how did they get there? Okay. So, and then everything just kind of expands from there. So that was how I got to that one. There's another one that I'll be more specific about, because it's not when I'm really writing it, so it's not super spoilery or anything. But I remember being in a class in college and walked in and sat down, and the professor or instructor from the previous class that had met in that room, their name was still written on the board. And I remember being that's a really interesting name. And then it was just I was just oh, I see this guy and that's his name. And he's chasing after this witch or something like that. And then it was just oh, okay, that's a guy. How'd he get there? How'd she get there? Why is he chasing her? That kind of thing. It's kind of how it usually starts. And then I'm just okay, well, this is where we're living now until that book's done. So yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, you different approaches.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that how it's been has it been the same across most projects like that, where it's like you have the scene or the moment comes first?
Yeah, I think as far as like where the story starts or like where I start thinking about it, there have been, so like with the example I gave and then the one I'm working on now, the scene that came first, like to my mind based on whatever had inspired it, like that scene is still in the story.
Oh, that's
there's another example. I think the screenplay that I wrote like in college or whatever, I guess that's the most significant project I've done like just before the things I'm working on now. That one, it was like the inspiration, whatever happened, and I imagined a scene, but that scene did not end up in the final thing. So I guess that's mainly the difference. I think other projects when I was younger, I think maybe I had to I was kind of trying to mishmash things together, and so it wasn't really that kind of same process, but at least like the things I've worked on like kind of in my more adult life, it's usually started the same way. And the main difference is just how much does that original moment or scene make it into the final product. Is it a little bit different? Is it there at all? I guess that's the main difference.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about you? Is it the same or?
I think, yeah, for most of my projects for most of my ideas, the idea is like, I want this kind of story and like this kind of setting. And then like, I don't necessarily know who it's about or what's going to happen in it. But I guess it's almost starting with a world, but like not a fleshed out world, more like a feeling of a world. I know the words vibe and aesthetic are super overused, but I almost am like, oh, this is the like, sort of like, kind of aesthetic. This is the feeling I want this story to have, or like, I want it to be these blends of genres or things like that. Yeah, so that is usually how I do it. Like I said, this one that I'm doing is different because I originally just wanted it to finish it. But then once I got past the first draft for this one, then that like idea of like, oh, this is the type of story this is, solidified itself in my head more. So I'll be curious to see with my next project, whatever that ends up being, like if it'll be more so like, okay, here's the core nugget of the concept, and like, then does that stay true the whole time? Yeah. One thing I think that's interesting for like how you start a story, or like the idea of like that concept, is like how, I don't know, this is a tangent, but I'm like how you explain the story to other people. Because some people I see come up with books like on Book Talk, or on, I listen to a bunch of podcasts and watch videos and stuff about people who make their living writing and stuff, and people will start with, oh, like, I feel like you see this on Book Talk a lot, like, oh, this type of story of like, I'm trying to think of what's like a common book, like the Fae are super big, and so it's super marketable because they'll do something like, oh, it's a romantasy like Court of Thorns and Roses, but she's the Fae, or something like that. I have not read Court of Thorns and Roses, so I don't know if they're both Fae or not, but like something like that, where it's like, oh, they take this, a lot of writers will take this like concept and characters and world for something that's like really popular, and then be like, oh, but what if this element was different? Yeah. And I think that's a really cool way to do a story too. And I also think that's a way that's like, that's a way to come up with a story that's like super easy to market and sell, because people go, oh, I like this other thing, but you've changed this one thing. That's interesting. I almost wish I came up with stories like that, but I mean, I guess I could, like, nobody's stopping me, but that tends not to be, mine, like, oh, but what if this, tends to be a little bit more abstract and a little harder to boil down into like, it's this, but this. Right. Yeah. So we talked about where the original idea comes from. As you're actually writing the story, how much do you tend to deviate from that original idea? And do you want to share some examples of how that's happened? Oh, okay. In this story, I deviated a ton because my original idea was just, I'm going to make this easy. hero's journey, elemental magic, there's a guy, there's a kid, he has a mentor, call to adventure, etc. And since then, a lot of stuff has changed, but some of the core things have stayed the same. Like the fact in my book, magic, having the magic will corrupt you unless you get a rune tattooed on you, and that stayed same the whole way through. And some of the deeper world building that doesn't necessarily show up in book 1 has stayed the same, but most of the like characters and some of the feelings of the world has changed. And I don't think I have a good answer about other projects because I never got any other projects past the initial well, actually, no, wait. I remembered something. Okay. I have a better example. Okay, wait. So Bubbleverse.
Oh, yeah.
Which is my sci-fi project from college that you've read a tiny bit of. Started based off of an image I saw on Pinterest. Where I was like, it was like some angsty art or something, and I was like, that looks cool, like I wonder who this person is and like what's going on, and I tried to like make a story based off of it, and it was very like, I wanted a character with amnesia in like a strange place I wanted maximum mystery. So in that original iteration of that, this guy's walking around this building, he doesn't know how he got there, he encounters some other people, they don't tell him anything, nothing's explained, there's these mysterious notes are popping up, but I didn't know where he was or what any of these things were. So that then got rewritten into Bubbleverse, which has basically 0 things in common with that initial idea, except for the fact that the main character doesn't remember where they are, doesn't remember who they are, or how they got where they are. So that's one where it completely changed. And I think it's because I didn't know how to like finish an idea. Like I just had like the initial opening scene and then nothing else.
Yeah.
Have you had ones that have changed, and if so, how much? By how much?
Yeah, so let's see. So as far as the original idea for like the one I'm working on, so like I said that kind of the way that the whole thing starts is like there's like a point of inspiration, there's a scene, and then we kind of build from there. Well, with this one, it was different because what happened was I think I like saw that original scene. I was like, okay, this is the kind of character this is how we got here. And then I made a lot of decisions about things I didn't want the book to have in it and things I wanted it to kind of like themes I wanted it to have and a bunch of stuff, and things got a little wild there. Like we kind of ran off the rails a little bit with too much of the, you know, kind of features that I was like, this needs to be in there, this needs to not be in there. And the story kind of turned into something that like, it just felt really convoluted, really. And then I think the thing that was helpful was kind of zooming back into that like original idea and then being like, okay, let's build a little bit more off of that. I think with this one, the thing that has differed mainly is like, between like where I'm at with it now and that original idea is like that scene still happens in the book, but the type of person that the main character is not the same. The original idea I had, I think she was a very like kind of femme fatale, kind of like kind of secret. Yeah, but then the more I was thinking about it, I was like, but that's not really like, I don't know. I think like the more I thought about the story, I was just like, that doesn't really feel like a story I can tell, I guess. Like that's, I don't know how to, I feel like I've just kind of said something and I don't really know how to explain what I mean. Not like,
that's okay, but just it didn't feel
yeah,
right.
It just didn't seem like it really fit. And so, yeah, and so it was just kind of mainly like the character changed. Let's see. For some things, I think it's just like, you have to like hold the inspiration a little bit loosely though, because sometimes it's like that original scene. So like, you know, it looks one way, but then once you actually start writing the story, it's like, okay, but you know, I can't throw the rest of the story on the altar of making sure that exact image I saw to start with makes it in the same exact way that I saw it. in the final product. So it's like there are tweaks, but like the kind of main scenario is still there, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah, and so it's really just like having that main point and then trying to be really careful to make sure that you just have to be careful with the rest of the story and kind of pay attention to like what road you're going down and things like that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I like what, like the not throwing the rest of the story on the altar of like the initial scene or like the concept, because it really is like, okay, what makes the best story? And I feel like wherever you start from, as you go along, you have to be like, okay, but what is a good story? Like what makes this story satisfying and fun and meaningful and all those things? Oh, a little follow-up question.
Yeah.
So you started with that scene and then you were like, okay, here's what I don't want this book to be, and here are things that I do want it to be. Like, what are some of those, if you want to give examples, and like, have you discarded those specific things?
So I think, part of the original idea of the story was very much, I wanted it to be about like forgiveness.
Which is not a bad thing.
Thing, but it was just like, it was forcing the events too much into a mold of like, we're going to present this in a very clean cut way. And it's like, that's not how it works. And so just trying to be about like, we're not trying to like have a theme. We're just trying to tell a story. But more on the side of like, the original like idea of that scene. So I mentioned like originally the character was kind of like a femme fatale kind of person, and then I just didn't really want to write that. I think because the only story I could come up with, not the only story I could come up with. What I was mainly thinking of, I think I was like too narrow in what I was originally being like, because the scene is, this woman kills this man. I'm not going to describe how, because that's spoilers. But
there's probably tons of women killing men.
But the specific way that was happening, I was like, okay, well, she would have to be like a spy, or she's an assassin. And I was just like, I just don't personally have any interest in writing that story. And then later, as I kind of was like, those aren't the only scenarios that would result in this event happening. And that's when it was like, oh, there's a different way to tell that story and have that character be. They don't have to be this archetype type of woman to be in that scenario. And it was just that kind of like let me zoom out and be like, okay, I can kind of build the rest of the story around this event without it having to be a certain genre or have those tropes or features, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer the question?
That does. I think that's really interesting. It's like, because it's almost more interesting to have the type of person you wouldn't expect doing a thing, or like in the type of genre, like not in the genre that you would expect it to be in. So yeah, I think it's a good like general, like not making too many rules for yourself, except for like, does this serve the story? Yeah, can be helpful. Like you don't want to like, because I noticed that too, in not so much in coming with the idea for the story, but in mine with revising it, there were certain things where I was like, oh, well, this has to happen. Like there was one thing I think you pointed out in the writing group, and it was a scene that I really didn't like. And I was like, well, yeah, but this has to happen because like this character has to be in trouble at this point. And you were like, but why? And I was like, that's a great question. Why does he have to get in trouble here? He doesn't. It's just because that's what had happened in the previous draft. So I was like, oh, that's what has to happen. Yeah. But yeah, there's less rules than you might think, which I feel like is both encouraging and like, ooh, a little overwhelming maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's just so, it's really hard to like, we're just so saturated with tropes and genres and kind of like frameworks that it's hard to remember that you don't have to follow one, I think sometimes, or you don't have to purposefully try to subvert one. You just tell a story. Yeah. It's just kind of the end of it.
Yeah. Like they're only as like, they are helpful tools, but not always necessary.
Right.
Or they're not necessary. It's just if you like them.
Yeah. If you want to use it, go for it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that is kind of our take on starting stories. If you have a different method or something you've kind of heard of and just think it's like a kind of unique way to start a story, feel free to let us know about that. And we'll see you next time.